You're listening to the TeenTix Arts Podcast, or TAP for short.
Here on TAP, we explore how teens and young people are engaging with music. What is the context that drives our local Seattle music scene? What, how, why, and where are teens listening? And maybe most importantly, how can you be involved?
We conduct interviews, dive into history, and more.
I'm Xandra.
And I'm Triona.
And today we're exploring the Pacific Northwest Grammy Board, interviewing the board governor for the local chapter of the Recording Academy, workshops for you to get involved, and our own critiques and thoughts on the Grammys.
So for a little bit of history, the Grammy Awards were started as the Gramophone Awards in 1958. They're music awards presented by the National Recording Academy for Arts and Sciences. And they were begun sort of after kind of a little bit in congruence with the Hollywood Walk of Fame project. And today they're a very big event. They're televised. And they're all about honoring and highlighting incredible artists in the music industry.
Yeah, as said by the Musician Hall of Fame, the recording industry led to the creation of the Grammy Awards as a way to honor the music industry's most talented composers, songwriters, and musicians. And today we're going to be talking to Victoria, who is a talented songwriter and vocalist, who is a current Pacific Northwest Chapter Board Governor for the Recording Academy, and is the co-chair of the Advocacy Committee.
All right. Hi, thank you so much for being here on the podcast with us. So to start off, can you introduce yourself, tell us just a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Victoria Contreras, and I'm a songwriter and a vocalist, and I'm a music advocate and accessibility advocate.
Great. Thank you so much for talking with us today. So we wanted to ask you, what is the Grammy Board and what is the process like to choose the awards? If you could go into some detail about the process.
Sure. So the Grammy Board, essentially there are 12 Grammy chapters in the United States, and board members are elected by Grammy members within the chapter that they reside. So the Pacific Northwest chapter represents Washington, Oregon, Hawaii, Alaska, Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. And we essentially, as board members, we serve as advisory boards that assist the Board of Trustees, the chair, the president of the Academy regarding chapter policy and operations. In terms of the process to choose the awards, so I'll just say I'm not an employee or an official spokesperson of the Academy. My capacity is a local board advisor. But the Grammys are peer-to-peer. They're peer-based awards. So essentially you have to meet the voting membership qualifications to become a voting member. So voting member qualifications can be found on the Recording Academy website, but essentially, the main thing is you have to be somebody who is recording and releasing music on an ongoing basis, and there's some specifics around that. So that's why it's a peer-based award. So I look at voting as a privilege, and I take it really seriously. It can take a long time to vote, sometimes like a week for me. In the categories that I vote in, but essentially I listen to everything within that category that I'm voting in. And I really love the process because I get to hear new artists that I may never have heard of otherwise, and always end up being a fan of new artists through this process. So I really value the opportunity to vote and just the process.
How does your own cultural identity influence the type of work that you do?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that being born healthy with no physical disabilities in the United States, with light skin to a family with financial stability does not come without privilege. And I think since I was young, I've recognized this in different ways. Perhaps much more overtly as I've gotten older. But I really look at the work that I've done as an opportunity. Each of these things that I've done are really about advocacy and allyship. And I don't know if you want me to go into it further, but some of the things I'm passionate about. But did that answer your question?
Yeah. You said advocacy and allyship. So how do you ensure that what you're doing is, continuing to be acts of advocacy and allyship? How do you feel like you're helping to make sure that artists are being represented by the Grammys across lots of different backgrounds?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So again, I'm not a Grammy spokesperson or a employee, but one of the things that I personally really focus on is, as a Grammy member, not even a board member, just all Grammy members have the opportunity to elect 2 other members throughout your term. So what that looks like is I can, see a new artist that's up and coming that I think is doing incredible work in the community and with their music. And I essentially put in a recommendation for that artist, and then they just need one other recommendation. So oftentimes I'll help them find another recommendation. And I really try to focus on, those 2 spots are really important. And so I really try to be thoughtful in my approach and make sure that different cultures and different styles of music are represented when I'm electing and using those 2 spots, just to ensure that the Grammy membership really reflects the community that we live in. And so I think that that's one of the biggest things that we can do as Grammy members, is to really just to remember that that's a privilege and an opportunity for us to ensure that artists are being represented across different backgrounds.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's really important. Representation is a significant thing. We also heard that you are part of the Academy's National Ticketing Committee. Could you possibly explain what your involvement with that is?
Sure. So it's not really a formal committee, but, one of the things I think that the Grammys does very best is advocacy. And I think that they do such a good job at ensuring that artists' voices are heard, and we don't really have another organization out there like that. And so with the ticketing committee, essentially when the whole Taylor Swift ticketing thing blew up with Ticketmaster, there were tons of pieces of legislation that came out. And so the Grammys just want to stay close to those pieces of legislation and understand them. And so the committee is just a group of people who have a lot of experience in the ticketing space, whether that's from an artist space, a venue space, a ticketing company space. So for 10 years, I was on the leadership team at Seattle Theater Group, and I negotiated our contract with Ticketmaster and managed that relationship. And so I know a lot about the space. And so it's been really interesting to see some of the legislation that's out. One of the other things I did in my former role was work with the Attorney General's office to pass bot legislation, which essentially makes ticket bots illegal in our state, and that was later adopted federally. And so for those reasons, I'm part of this team that is essentially just keeping our eyes on legislation that is coming out. It should be really interesting to see how things shake out. But for me, the most important thing is consumer and artist protection. And I think there's some great legislation out there that can satisfy what needs to happen in terms of change, with some modifications for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's all that we have for questions here. But is there anything else that you want to tell us? Anything that you'd like our listeners to know?
Yeah, I think that something that is good for listeners to know is I talked a little bit about advocacy. I co-chair our Grammy advocacy team here in the Pacific Northwest, and I think it's important for your listeners to know the role that the Grammys play in terms of advocating. There are a lot of archaic things in place that are prohibiting artists, songwriters, from getting compensated the way that they should be. And so there are a lot of parody acts that are out there that are simply really kind of creating some parody with other industries where there is intellectual property involved. And so we're doing some really good work to ensure that music can maintain and can be a viable career option for musicians by changing some of these archaic laws and rules that are in place. For instance, one of the things that the Grammys has been so good about fighting for a very long time, and we're actually finally seeing some traction, is terrestrial radio. Right now, when you turn on your radio in your car, the artist is paid differently depending on how you listen to radio. So if you listen to satellite radio, the performer is paid. If you listen to Spotify in your car, the artist is paid. But if you listen to terrestrial radio, and that's AM or FM radio, the performer is not paid a performance right. And we are one of a handful of countries that don't pay a performance right. And so we've been working on legislation for a really long time, or backing up legislation for a very long time to change that. And there's a lot of things like that the Grammys are doing behind the scenes that I think often get overshadowed by the shine and the glitz and the glamour of the awards. But we meet with legislators once a year. We have something called Advocate Day, and throughout the country, we're meeting with legislators. So we're talking to them about how these pieces of legislation affect us as musicians. And it's really powerful. And I believe that's a huge part of why this legislation we've moved the needle. It's about, they get stacks and stacks of paper and they're supposed to just sign off on them. And they often don't get to hear personal stories as to why these pieces of legislation needs to be passed. And so I think it's good for your listeners to know that the great work that the Grammys is doing in a lot of zones, but in particular in advocacy, which is something that's really close to my heart.
Thank you so much. It's been really great to talk to you, hear about all the work that you do for advocacy.
We really appreciate you taking the time to come and be on our podcast.
Thank you. Thanks. Great questions.
It's been really interesting to hear about the Grammy Board and the people behind making the decisions for the Grammys. It's kind of interesting that there's a $100 fee annually to be part of that board.
Yeah, that I know we didn't really talk about that much in the interview, but doing some of our background research, I think we both sort of thought that seemed like it was somewhat of an accessibility barrier there. $100 is a lot of money to vote in some awards. So I don't know. Personally, I think that I'm curious about what that money is funding, how much that is, contributing to the advocacy that is done by the Recording Academy and by the Grammys. I don't know. What do you think about that, Xandra?
Yeah, I completely agree. It's really interesting. Where does this money go to? Is there any transparency with that? They have a bunch of different membership types, one for voting, for performers and songwriters, and then they have professional ones, and they also have ones for students. And to submit a form to be part of that, you need 2 recommendations from a music industry peer. And once again, that $100 fee, some people just can't afford that, so their say doesn't get recognized.
It's really interesting to think too about the cultural significance of the Grammys. Being able to vote in the Grammys is a big deal because the Grammys themselves are a big deal. And, you know, that's entirely because it's been, you know, created as a big deal. You know, like we have the Teenie Awards, which we, you know, now we honor teens in, you know, programs, our programs and partner programs. But for, you know, for quite a few years, the Teenie Awards were about honoring our partners and giving out awards to them, and it was structured similarly to the Grammys or the Tony Awards. And it's, you know, the Teenie Awards, super cool, you know, lots of TeenTix involvement, lots of local involvement, but you know, not on any level with something like the Grammys, where it's nationally televised and it's like hugely recognizable. If you are a Grammy winner, that, I mean, that's a incredible honor, but it also is an incredible career achievement that then allows artists to, you know, present themselves as a Grammy winner, which holds weight in the industry. So it's definitely something where, you know, representation has a huge impact. I mean, yeah, what do you think on that, Xandra?
Yeah, definitely. It's like so significant, like music in the music industry and music education and advocacy, and it's really interesting that we make like such a big deal of the Grammys. And after doing some research, I was curious about like how much does a Grammys trophy cost, and it's like $15. And it's kind of interesting to put it into perspective, like, wow, we're making such a big deal about the Grammys and the trophies cost $15 to make. And you can't even like sell it or anything. And also the artists like don't get paid, but they get this $15 trophy. So woo.
You know, and industry prestige. You know, I mean, I think it's definitely interesting to think about how the Grammys are something significant because we've decided that they're something significant as a society. And as the, you know, the music industry. But, you know, thinking about some of that money, you know, like there is, right, that membership fee, you know, I think that does fund some of their advocacy stuff. And I think it probably helps fund some of their stuff with like the Grammy Museum, which, Xandra, do you want to speak a little bit more on that?
Yeah, after doing some research, we found out about the Grae Museum, a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to celebrating, exploring music, and inspiring like exhibits, education, grants. And it's really about like exploring different like diverse backgrounds and recognizing like different musical heritage.
So does the museum, like, does it put on programs for stuff? You know, how does it actually, you know, go beyond just like highlighting stuff? Do they do any, you know, specific outreach to help do some of that, you know, education and access?
Yeah. I was like looking into it, and it's really interesting that they do like Grammys in schools. They like recognize the music and music education and give these students a path to be like successful in the music industry. This museum is located in LA, so it's a little bit far from Seattle, but they also offer like virtual programs, which I thought is interesting because you don't have to be in LA to like learn about the workshops like music production and songwriting and music of the civil rights movement and learning about different speakers.
That sounds super interesting. I definitely want to go look up some of those and see when some of those things are happening because those sound like really interesting workshops.
Yeah, definitely. And they also offer a bunch of cool programs, I guess. If you're ever like visiting LA, they have like a Grammy camp weekend, a career day, and they have like Grammy museum sessions. Maybe it's like you can like jam out with your friends or something. They have mentorship Monday, school tours, and like education awards. I think it's great that they're offering like all of these workshops to like pave a path for people that want to be in the music industry when they get older.
Yeah, I mean, and right, I would hope that they're, focusing the two in programs like that on access and on serving underrepresented voices, because, I think the Grammys are something so significant. It really matters for people to see someone up on that stage who is representing them and, help, teens to believe that, one day they could maybe be up on that stage too.
Yeah, definitely. The Grammys definitely has been critiqued for maybe like a lack of diversity and like picking artists that don't really represent a large amount of people, and that's definitely something that can be improved. And like the accessibility with like having that $100 fee just to vote is something that can definitely be improved, because some people like think of the Grammys as like the scammies, diversity issues, and a bunch of things that can be improved. But I think that they can get there.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking to Victoria, and she was, seemed really passionate about the work that the Grammys were doing for advocacy and for representation. So, hopefully we'll see, as time goes on, we will be able to witness some of the development of that, and watch the Grammys, maybe become a slightly more accessible, more representational event for everyone.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think like being able to see someone on that stage with like a similar like experience or cultural background is so significant, because it can like make a person feel like they're able to accomplish that as well. On a little more like lighthearted stuff, if you were hosting the Grammys, who is someone that you would want to announce?
Ooh, someone I would want to announce.
Yes.
I don't know. I feel like a specific artist, or like an award that I would want to announce.
Either or, actually.
I mean, I think announcing something like, Song of the Year would be really cool.
I agree, yes.
I think if I could, have like an artist that I could announce, I think I would want to be able to announce the unexpected one. Just maybe like the person who might be the underdog, or the, the one who nobody really knows who they are, and so nobody's expecting them to win anything. They're, oh cool, they got nominated, and then over here you've got like Beyonce, who is incredible and has won a lot of Grammys, and will continue to win more Grammys because she's incredible.
Yeah.
But you've got, right, that's a very well-known artist who has won a lot of Grammys. And so people are, maybe more anticipating, oh yeah, that's, there are the people who win. This year with Bonnie Raitt winning Song of the Year, where no one was really expecting that one to happen. But her song, Just Like That, I mean, I went and listened to it. Afterwards, I was sobbing. She absolutely deserved that win. I think there's really, like, I can't see anything other than that song winning. And so I think, right, and that's an instance of, the Grammys highlighting something where people aren't expecting it. And so then, right, like, so then I went and listened to the song, and it's a beautiful song, and it's a incredibly, heartbreaking, heartwarming, it's so emotional. It's such a powerful song. And, I think that's really where the Grammys have the potential to be really strong, is to find those incredible songs and find, artists, who people don't know who they are. Like most people, Bonnie Raitt is still a fairly popular musical artist. So, I think, right, just continuing to try and find the new music, and the music from people who are, new to the scene, people who have been making music for a long time and who have never really been heard. I think, I know the Grammys, it's, partially about right, like popularity and, this is the stuff that people are listening to and do enjoy. But, I think really, they've also got that opportunity for people to, people watch the Grammys and then they can, oh, I've never heard of this song. Now I want to go listen to it. And then that introduces people to new artists and new music that they might not have found on their own.
Yeah. And like, speaking of like new music, new artists, thinking about someone who I think should win a Grammy who hasn't. One of my favorite artists, her name is Umi. She's this great R&B artist. I saw her live once. It was amazing. I was about to cry. Like,
it's so exciting.
No way. And I brought like this flower crown and I gave it to her and she sang with it. And she has like such a positive energy. She has great music. I definitely recommend listening to her newest album. Like, I definitely think that she should win a Grammy someday. She has like a heart of gold in her songs. You can just tell. Who's someone that you think should win a Grammy that hasn't?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, there are so many incredibly talented artists out there. I listen to a lot of, small indie artists. I had a student teacher last year. Her name is Nessa Grazing. She has some really fantastic music up on Spotify. It's really interesting because it's like, this is, a student teacher in my English classroom. Yeah. And then she's bringing her guitar in and having us, write song lyrics just for our poetry unit. And then she's just like improvising songs from our lyrics. And she actually, her big claim to fame is that she opened for Mitski. They went to college together.
Oh my gosh, no.
Yeah, no, I mean, we all, like, when she told us that, we were like, are you serious? That's incredible.
How can you casually drop that and expect everything to be okay? Like, what?
I know. And this was like my English teacher last year.
Your English teacher?
Yeah.
I wish she was my English teacher.
Yeah, so I think, she definitely, like, some of her stuff, just got to get it out there, and then, right, there are so many people who, I am quite confident would make it big if, they just got that little push and people, really started actually going out and seeking out their music. Don't forget to check out our monthly playlist, link in the description and on Spotify. This month, we're looking at songs that we feel should have won Grammys and didn't.
And here are the songs that we've been listening to. Personally, I've been listening to Ami, her song Ricky Bobby, because I've been practicing for a dance performance, so I've been listening on repeat. What about you?
I am high-key in my Taylor Swift phase these past couple weeks. I was not expecting it, but that's where I'm at, and her music is really good, which I feel like I go back and forth between being like, oh, her music's overrated, or like, oh wait, no, her music's really, really good. So that's currently where I'm at.
That's a wrap for this month's Tap.
The music you're hearing is Periwinkle by Totem Star artist Aleyanna Grae, and the editing in this episode is done by Grant Vu.
We want to thank the Vera Project for welcoming us into their space, and Ground Zero Radio for their support in the production of this podcast. Finally, huge thank you to our off-mic teammates, Olivia and Josh, and all the other folks at TeenTix whose work makes this podcast possible.
You've been listening to the TeenTix Arts Podcast, uplifting youth voices and artists in the local music scene through access to education and critical discussion.